Hey guys, and welcome back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Everything. My name is Pete, and welcome back to another edition of a little segment on this channel that we like to call Legacy Reviews. If you've not been by the channel before, or you've never seen this segment, welcome. This is a segment here where I, on the channel, look at the past, the first 3 Yu-Gi-Oh! Shows in sequential order, that being Duel Monsters, GX, and then ultimately 5Ds, and I give my thoughts and kind of theories, predictions, and just general review of where I think the show is going and that week's episode. I can do that because I've never seen the show, I have no idea what's going to happen, and it hopefully gives a fresh perspective for you guys, and it's definitely a lot of fun for me to do. So with that out of the way, we're going to jump into the first part of this Duel Monsters episode 19. I'll be right back. Alright guys, so we're kicking this off here, episode 19 this week. This is episode 19 of Duel Monsters Labyrinth Tag Duel. So this is actually one of these duels that I sort of kind of remember from when I watched this episode. It was a very famous episode, like, I don't know, 15 years ago, whenever this came out, 20 years ago, wherever it was. I remember as a little kid having like bits and pieces of this duel, or just of knowing the Labyrinth brothers. Of course, as I've also, as you guys have heard, and as I have seen, we also saw these same brothers over in GX, maybe about 8 or so episodes ago from where we are right now in GX. And so we've had kind of a backwards introduction to them in some ways, but now we're seeing them debut for the first time actually in Duel Monsters. If you don't remember last episode, we were kind of left with Bandit Keith, robbing all of his crew, taking their star chips, running off to Pegasus' castle, and then he ultimately had them, right before he knocked out his crew, put a huge rock in front of the entrance of the cave where our little crew was with, Yugi and his gang. So they were trapped. That's where we pick up in this episode, and there's no way out. There's no way they can move it. But Bakura actually uses his Millennium item because supposedly the Millennium ring that he has allows him to attract and find other Millennium items, other Millennium pieces. So we use that in a way to go find Pegasus's Millennium eye. And that ultimately leads us down to kind of man-made kind of cavern. We get to a labyrinth room, and that is ultimately where we meet the brothers. As Yugi quickly figures out, they are player killers, these brothers, and they're saying, hey, you have to find the correct entrance, the way out of here back to the surface by defeating us in a duel. I think the messed up part of it is, right, even if you win the duel, you have to guess which door is the exit. So one, ultimately, you'll probably be trapped down there forever, like they said, just wandering the labyrinth, and the other one will actually be the way up to the surface. So it's kind of a 50-50 crapshoot that you're joining into, because, all right, it's 50-50 here. Maybe you're going to duel based on skill of who's going to win here, right? And a tag duel, the first tag duel that we're seeing so far on the show. But then you flip it to the other part of it, like, all right, we're going to win. Now I have another 50-50 shot of guessing the correct door. So it is a little bit underhanded and cheap, but it is not surprising from characters that are supposed to be player killers, not surprising from the brothers here, the Labyrinth brothers, that something like that is happening. And the duel is really set up with the idea that, hey, Yugi says to Jinochi, it's both of them are going to step up and duel the brothers. It's a tag duel here. It's kind of groundbreaking stuff we have here in Duel Monsters going on. And this is being the first tag duel that we are seeing. And going, hey, if we win this, we're going to have enough star chips, assuming that they're able to guess the right door and get out of there, to get to Pegasus' castle. So this is a huge deal. But right off the bat, they start the duel and they don't know what they're walking into, which is classic protagonist, right? And Labyrinth Wall gets played, and now you create an interesting game within the game, right? So you have the duel itself. Duel Monsters is a game itself, obviously, right? But then inside of that, you're playing a game of, we don't really know the rules in here in the Labyrinth Wall. The brothers are clearly at an advantage of what is going on. The amount of, the level on your cards, on your monster cards, is how much space that they could walk inside the labyrinth. So you have to escape the labyrinth itself, keep your life points, and then that's how you win the duel, to even have a chance to guess the door at the end of the duel in the first place. So it is very convoluted in the sense of, if you're the protagonist, we understand as the audience, and it's a really crappy, like, kind of scummy way to do it, but it's intriguing, it's fun, right? And it's just, we have rule breaking here of how the game actually works in Duelist Kingdom, and this is actually one of the ways that I'm all for it. I've not enjoyed some of the other kind of styles that we have had in the last few episodes of kind of breaking the game from what I know from seeing VRAINS and stuff like that, that being my first Yu-Gi-Oh show. But this one, I actually like the setting. So the brothers explain the kind of the duel rules of what's going on, and basically it's kind of puts Jinochi on alert, because if either one of the tag team partners actually loses all of their life points, the team loses itself. So Honda and everybody else wastes no time of being like, yeah, Jinochi is he's a guy that's gonna have to really up his game here. It's like, man, like you just said last episode that he's really improving as a duelist. Like, stop cutting the man down every single chance you get. So when they explain the rules and the actual duel starts, Pegasus is watching this, of course, you know, on sipping his wine, enjoying the time of his life, basically saying, yeah, Yugi, don't be mad of you know, what's going to happen, the outcomes that are going to, you know, go on, you know, don't lose your focus. And it's like, yeah, it's easy for you to say that chilling on one camera, you're watching the duel go on in some weird, creepy underground labyrinth room. The other one, you're watching Mokuba, this poor child, be, you know, tied to the wall with metal chains. Like, Pegasus really is a sick man. There was a moment in the duel where I go, nah, I don't, that's not a thing. It's like in Force Awakens when you're like, yeah, that's not how the Force works. That's basically how I felt, because one of the brothers, he uses polymerization to fuse together Shadow Ghoul to Labyrinth Wall. So the actual like field spell that is going on, which that's what I think the Labyrinth Wall is, it's like a field spell, he's able to fuse the monster into the wall itself, so he's able to cheat the game, and it doesn't require, like, you know, the amount of, you know, Shadow Ghoul has 5 levels. It's a level 5 monster, right? So theoretically, every turn it should only be able to move 5 spaces. Well, the Shadow Ghoul now can move infinite spaces, because technically there's no spaces on the walls, like the brother said. It's completely cheap and BS, and they're clearly they're cheating Yugi and Jinochi. And this completely takes, you know, Yugi off guard, as it would imagine it would take off guard anyone. So you have to quickly come up with a strategy of what's going on. So as the brothers are gloating about it, and they're summoning Labyrinth Tank, which is a really cool card, 2400 attack, and that's driving its way into the Labyrinth. Yugi has Celtic Guardian on the field after Jinochi kind of puts down a monster and then doesn't play that turn. He says it doesn't have to play that turn, so it doesn't move forward inside the maze. And it looks like Celtic Guardian is going up for failure, but you know Yugi is going to have something in his back pocket, and in this case, it's beautiful teamwork between the Jinochi and Yugi, which I really love. Like, you know, these two know each other very well, and I love that it's unspoken, that Jinochi's like, yeah, just follow my lead, Yugi, but he's saying that as an inner monologue, and that's exactly what Yugi did. A trap card, you know, kind of was attached over on Jinochi's monster. It allows Celtic Guardian to not only get 500 attack, but it actually traps the ghoul itself. So when it goes to attack Celtic Guardian, does not work. Celtic Guardian's able to completely erase the ghoul, and now it looks like I don't know if we're turning the tables on the Labyrinth Brothers. I won't go that far yet, but we're definitely gaining some ground, some foothold in this duel, and we don't feel like we're on our heels as much as we were in the beginning and the middle parts of the duel here. And we zoom out, and we have, you know, Pegasus enjoying it, Kaiba running over, you know, towards the castle to try to find Mokuba. We see a great, you know, kind of shot between Mokuba and Kaiba, both kind of looking at their necklaces that they have pictures of each other, which I thought was a kind of a really sweet thing. And it actually shows a little bit of humanity. A little bit of humanity in Kaiba that maybe he does have. He at least does have a humanity in terms of love for his brother. And, you know, one of Pegasus's goons comes in and says, yeah, we haven't been able to catch Kaiba. Yeah, no freaking shock there. But Pegasus knows. He knows exactly where he is going, and just hopefully Mokuba can hold on long enough for him to get there without something catastrophic happening to that poor kid. So yeah, guys, that's my review on episode 19 of Duel Monsters this week. We're gonna, I would imagine, pick up with part 2 of the Labyrinth Duel next week, so stay tuned for that. I'm gonna switch over to GX, so I'll be right back. Alright guys, welcome back to the GX side of the review. This is episode 19 versus Yugi's deck part 2, so this is obviously a continuation of last week, or God knows when this is posted, but the last episode that we did together, it's a continuation of that duel. And I'm gonna be honest right off the top, this actually might be my favorite duel so far of GX. I enjoyed the Judai and Ryo duel. I thought it was really fascinating. I like that our protagonist lost so early on in the show. But from a back and forth perspective, where I feel like these two duelists, or at least their decks, are pretty evenly matched, I think this is my favorite duel so far in GX. And I'm going to butcher his name, but Kurizaka is the kind of duelist that is creating other people's decks through a combination of cards from other people's decks and other people's strategies. And this time, he is settled on Yugi, which is a great person to settle on in making his deck. If you were not by last episode, basically, he stole Yugi's deck that was on display here at Duelist Academy and ultimately wanted to use it to finally get a win so he could stop being mocked. And where we last left them, Judai was really on the ropes, like as Misawa says, like Kurizaka's, his strategy is just flawless, and the deck, the cards that he has are so powerful in comparison to Judai, because Judai really relies on his deck working in a perfect synergy with themselves. There's not necessarily, if you really think about it, there's not really powerful, like all knowing kind of ace cards that, yeah, that's going to OTK someone. It's really just a combination of what does he fuse, where's his trap cards, how does he get certain kind of spell cards onto the field that ultimately lead Judai to be such a formidable duelist. We saw here that he used Flame Wingman here in the second half of the duel to it ultimately was the thing that ended up sealing the deal for him, and when it was boosted up, it had 3100 attack, but that's really the highest for the most part we have seen Judai go, and only because we've only seen him go that far, you have more respect, and I think Misawa shows it here as he's had throughout the show, a respect for Judai's dueling style because of just how skilled it takes to utilize your deck. But he makes the ultimate point at the end, Judai, that we'll end up getting to. So the sides go back and forth, and what I really like was the setting that was set up once the skyscraper effect of Judai's go up. That cityscape feel of this duel taking place, instead of it taking place on the cliffside, that in reality that it's taking place, I thought was a really nice touch and really cool art style it provided. And just the showing of, like, this guy has emulated his appearance off of Yugi. Basically, Judai is seeing him at this point as Yugi. He's seeing kind of the shadow come out from behind Kurizaka, because it feels like that's who you're dueling, and it takes actually Judai snapping out of that ultimately is what leads him to kind of focus on what is going on. I will say this is a week of Karibos, I would say, in episode 19 here. We get them heavily featured here in GX. We see them in the episode 19 of Duel Monsters a little bit, sort of, but we've had it there before, but we really see it as well in episode 19 of 5Ds, which we're going to get to right after this. So it is a week of Karibos, of different Kariba, Wing Karibo, Karibot, like every version that we've seen so far, we kind of see it heavily, at least in these last two shows. So it was Karibo. I'm declaring this Karibo week. For everyone listening at whatever time you're listening to this. But another element that I did like about the duel is not only the setting, but I like that they were using, old style cards. Judai uses a Pot of Greed again and all that, but they were using cards and spell cards that actually allowed them to reach into each other's decks, into each other's graveyards, and utilize those cards. So we see Kurizaka, he ultimately uses Judai's emergency provisions and helps himself get life points. We see that he has the spiderweb, later to gain a card, a monster from Judai. Judai uses it back later on, and another spell card that he's able to have to pull polymerization out of his deck. So the back and forth that we were using there, I really thought was awesome, and I like that. Hey, I can utilize my deck to the fullest, and I could also borrow from your deck when I'm in trouble. I think that's just a really cool setup for an interesting duel. Silent Doom was the spell card that Judai used to kind of steal from Kurizaka's deck there. The other funny, element, we'll talk about it here in this episode, was Sho kind of having a little bit of a crush on Dark Magician Girl. We saw that as another legacy card pop up here in the show, and that was something. I mean, Sho, this is not your one chance at love, buddy. She's not real. She's a duel monster. She's a card. like she does not exist. But I thought that was a little funny anime touch there that they had as well. And of course, it would be his character. The big also appearance that I'm sure all you guys will be talking about as well is we see Blackluster Soldier. This is a card that I hear Nick T nonstop talk about, and I actually seen it for me for the first time in the shows, a little bit backwards, but I'm seeing it here in GX. Very powerful card, 3,000 attack. They said it was like the most powerful warrior type card that you could have inside the game. But Judai, using his skills, using Silent Doom, using Flame Wingman as well, is able to get around Kuribo, is able to get around Kurizaka's, kind of attacks where they're both going back and forth too, where you think you're going to finish the other one off, and then are ultimately able to save themselves, to negate the battle damage, to have some card to protect them, to have some monster take the sacrifice. I really, really love the back and forth in this duel, and I think it's ultimately showcased at the end of this when you have the entire school, for the most part, or at least a lot of people watching what happened. And I think that was important for Kurizaka to see that even though you lost with this fantastic deck, that you have to have faith in your deck, is what Judai said. That's what Rio says. I was surprised to see him and Asuka kind of show up here on the scene, and that they thought about stopping it, but they wanted to watch what actually transpired here. And Rio makes the point that, yeah, Judai's right. It is about having faith in your deck because you build it, you put your blood, sweat, and tears into that deck, and that connection that you have, the duelist spirit that you have there, that's what can sway a match to go either way. And that's why ultimately you lost here. If this was actually Yugi using this deck, Judai would have lost because he actually knows to use the deck to its fullest potential and have actually the spirit, the belief in it. It's not just having skill. We've seen that for a lot of these shows so far that have transpired of believing in your deck, and I'm not surprised it happened here. So Judai, he gets the win. It kind of works out for both groups here, and we go back and we put the deck back. Kurizaka is not going to be in trouble because he utilized it so well, is the point that Rio makes. Judai gets a cool Yugi Moto poster that they could kind of hang in the dorm that he got from Miss Tome, and then Sho comes running and says, oh, you got a doppelganger, Judai. Oh my god, what's going on? I'm like, well, this is going to lead to next week with some kind of wacky shenanigan that's going to happen, and it's just Kurizaka dressing up as Judai, eerily similar. I mean, is almost perfect in the sense of looking exactly like him. The hair color is a little bit off because it's a wig, but he is nailing the impersonation, and Judai's like, yep, you're not getting anything that we just talked about out there, right? You're not making something for yourself, you're just trying to emulate someone else. But he's a character that I would love to see again. I thought he was very fascinating. Definitely can show that he's a skilled duelist with incredible knowledge, and if he really believes in himself to make a deck himself, which is what everyone told him to do, I think he can be someone that can factor in later if he ever shows up. But as we've seen in the show, there's a lot of one-off characters, so I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't come back and he has his little funny bit at the end where he's trying to get Judai's catchphrase of, the gotcha. That was a fun duel, and Judai's like, no. You have to do it like this. This is how your hand has to be. I thought that was a little kind of funny bit there, and I was kind of showing that moment of just embarrassment of like, yeah, these are the people I hang out with. Hayato having the same feeling as well. So yeah, guys, that's kind of my thoughts here to wrap up this two-parter duel here. Episode 19 of GX. We're going to finish off with 5D's episode 19. So I'll be right back for the finale of this review. Alright guys, we're back for the final part of this week's Legacy review. This is episode 19 of 5D's. Ready for this title? Spirit World Contaminated. Evil Intent, the Super Demonic Lord Ito. I mean, that is ridiculous. Like, that is a mouthful for an episode title. Wow. But the episode itself, it's the week of Karibos, and it's the week of two-parters, because this is a second-parter, a dual-parter to last week's episode that we had of what was going on with Luca and the Spirit World, and ultimately the tournament that is going on. If you need a quick refresher, we are still in the Fortune Cup, and we are figuring out, or Godwin, we should say, and his cronies are figuring out who are signers and who are not. They had a strong inclination that Luca from the crowd was actually a signer who they ultimately they gave the invitation to in the first place, and then Lua kind of dueled in her stead and lost. Well, now we get to see Luka's potential with creepy-ass Professor Frank that was very calm, cool, collected assassin, kind of a player-killer style person that we saw working under Godwin. Except this week, he's completely unlike last episode and last week, and he's incredibly unhinged, even creepier somehow, but in a different type of way, and it's just downright scary. Like, we see a little bit of his motivations and why he is doing this, that he wants to destroy the spirit world and what is going on here, and I guess he just doesn't like it. Is it because he doesn't have a connection to it, or like, what is the depth of his hatred? I don't really understand that there, but he is genuinely terrifying to remember. He's dueling a child here and has no remorse, no care in the world, and is laughing about it, is maniacally laughing about destroying the spirit world around her. It's just unsettling, and I said that last week, and this took it to another level, a different level, and both of them are creepy in their own right. But we'll get to that part of it. We pick up with Luka. She's kind of hypnotized and trapped. Professor Frank ultimately ends up getting hypnotized and trapped as they both get pulled into the spirit world. So you're seeing their like bodies say things and actually duel, like the fans, the crowd, people like Yusei, Bomer, all these people watching on. They are able to see some of it, but they're not able to see what is actually going on. Really only at the point in the episode in the beginning, it's Luka who's able to see what's going on, then pulls Professor Frank in, and Lua was also pulled in, but he doesn't really see the actual spirit world itself. He just kind of trapped there, and he knows something is wrong, and when he wakes up later in the episode, he doesn't even remember what happened. All he is saying in his sleep and his kind of comatose, hypnotized state is Luka's name, just like he said when they were 3 when this happened. And now Luka is remembering more and more of what ultimately took place when she was a child. And that is what Godwin is digging for, right? And we said this last week. It's still this week. He's another creepy, horrible figure that I love. Like, he's really shaping up to be a great villain here with him and Iliaster, and we're going to dive more into that as the show goes on. But Luka is staying afloat during this duel with Sunlight Unicorn. That is the thing, that connection, her Karibot. Those two things are really guiding her existence in the spirit world and ultimately protecting her from Professor Frank. But the interesting part of this is that we actually get to see this spirit world. There's some beautiful parts of it, but then there's also a lot of decay and destroyed parts, and that is the ultimate evil that is going on, that she equates to Professor Frank being that evil, being that dark person. I don't think he was that dark person years ago. I think that's ultimately going to tie back to Godwin and what is going on there. They were put on the radar of Luka back when the coma happened, and the stories she told about when she came back from that coma, which were like ancient dueling kind of spirit legends. That's what fascinated them in the beginning, and they, I think, represent that darkness, that evil, not Professor Frank, one of their minions. But as a kid, she can't recognize that, and we forgive her for that, we understand that. But I said last week, I was like, was the voice that she was hearing all a trick? What was going on there? It actually wasn't. The voice that we are shown to actually, if we're to take it at face value, no pun intended there, if we're to take it at face value, the voice actually came from Ancient Fairy Dragon, which I think even more shows that she's a signer. It was confirmed. We know it was confirmed in the episode. We knew all along. We saw her tattoo light up. Yusei saw her tattoo light up later in this episode. But now that she is a dragon, that seals it for me. We're setting the stage now here. I think there's supposed to be 5 of them. So we know Yusei is one. We know Jack is one. We know Luka is now one. I'm pretty sure Aki is one. Who is going to be that 5th person? Have we been introduced to them yet? Are they someone to come? I think they're going to ultimately be someone to come, a new character. But we're making up our 5 here that are the dragons, that are the signers, and is what Godwin is looking for. But the flashback scene, when the spirit world, it changes from the decay, and it goes to the beautiful oasis that it once was. And it's Ancient Fairy Dragon and a few other fairy monsters, which is what makes up Luka's deck. It's what she could communicate to and who she talks to. She was here when she was 3 years old, getting along with them, having the time of her life. And she feels kind of, you feel for her, because she's saying Lou only cares about himself, even at a young age. Mom and Dad are always working, and like, this is where I want to stay, and if you guys need a protector, I can be that for you. She just couldn't stay there because Lua's actually shouting her name when she was in a coma pulled her out of this world, whether she wanted to or not. It pulled her out of the world. And so when you see her connection to the monsters, to the spirit world, when we go back to present day in the spirit world, it's that much sadder seeing Ancient Fairy Dragon fossilized, pushed against a mountain and a rock in the background, being able to speak, we think, but just looking so kind of weak and injured, and just not what the beautiful kind of aspect of what that card and what that monster is. And that was just, I would say, heartbreaking in itself. And we know Ruka will end up getting back Ancient Fairy Dragon and will restore it to kind of its full power. But right now, you know, that was hard to see. We flash back into the current day, and we jump out of the spirit world, and Lua has passed out in the crowd. And, you know, I want to give a shout out to Himuro and Grandpa there, and also the twins' little friend that I forget the name of. You guys can tell me down below. They are some real people. Like, the friend maybe has been friends with them for years, the little kid, right? But Grandpa and Himuro, remember 10 or so episodes ago, Yusei meets them in a jail. Like, they didn't know each other. They didn't know these kids, nothing. And to take Lua to the infirmary, to have that much care over these characters and are invested in them, shows how much they see something in them and maybe know they're special. They definitely know Yusei is special, but shows what good people they really are, and that they're trying to kind of turn around their lives of what they ultimately see, right? Grandpa is a collector, you know, he's kind of just trying to find his place, to learn more about the game, and I think he really actually likes Yusei and what he represents, and Himuro in similar ways, but he's also trying to redeem himself. And remember, this was a guy that was a former pro duelist. He lost to Jack a whole bunch of times, and all that stuff happened. And now he went kind of on the down, the grungy scene of dueling, and was just not a great man, was just out for himself. And I think he's trying to redeem himself through hanging out with this group. But it's always, it's kind of sweet just to see that how quickly they've cared about this group of people and how quickly they care about the twins. But it is kind of nice, you know. You might say it's a little rushed, but I don't know. I think there is goodness in those two characters, so I wanted to give them a shout out this week. So guys, this is where we get to the part that I talked about earlier that I foreshadowed. Professor Frank just losing his mind, and as he actually gets dealt life point damage, that's where I think he became more and more unhinged. I don't think he was even fearing that he was actually going to lose. He believed he was going to win the whole time. But he really took it personal there from Ruka, and he really hates the spirit world for some reason. So I hope we dive into a little bit of that. But the back and forth between them was ultimately the styles of their duels, right? Which I love when that is showcased and it fits into the story. Those two become one and the same. They become synonymous with each other. And we have Professor Frank, overwhelming power, right? A little bit unhinged. That's how his monsters are attacking. That's how he kind of chains together his spell and trap cards. And Ruka doing it in the sense that, hey, I made this promise years ago to protect this world and these fairy monsters, and every move she makes, even if it hurts herself, is protecting Kuribot. It's protecting whatever monster she has on the field, even though she is taking punishing damage over and over. And you got to respect the girl for really standing up for what she believes in. And we get to the climax of the duel. The climax of the duel is even after she gave, Professor Frank kind of life points back, ultimately saved him. It was all for good reason, because Ancient Fairy Dragon, comes in, grabs Professor Frank, and he doesn't seem scared. So I don't know if he knows what is happening, or he knows that this world can't ultimately kill him because we're in the spirit world. I don't know exactly how that works here in 5Ds as compared to duel monsters, but Ruka calms Ancient Fairy Dragon down and says, it's not worth it to kind of do any of this stuff. He's not worth it to go after. I guess just didn't want to kind of soil the hands of poor Ancient Fairy Dragon, but she uses a set card. It ultimately ends up destroying both her and Professor Frank. So we end in a draw here, the first draw that I think of that we have seen here in 5Ds, and they are both knocked out of the tournament. But Godwin got what he wanted. His crazy doctor, little bastard, got what he wanted. They were able to confirm that Ruka was a signer, and that's ultimately all this was for, even though Professor Frank is completely knocked unconscious at the end of this duel, which was a sight to see that I really enjoyed. Yusei came down here about in the last third of this duel and was really concerned about Luka and was watching on, and when the duel ends up ending, and Professor Frank is kind of in and out of consciousness and doesn't know what is going on, Luka passes out for a brief while there. Yusei walks past him as Professor Frank stands up after his brief unconscious period and carries off Luka. And I think the crowd kind of awes, and I think that kind of connected of like who Yusei is and really the values that he has. And I think that's gonna help him later on with the crowd on his side when they see the true sinisterness of what is going to be going on either at this cup or later on in the season. That is going to show that, hey, this kid from Satellite, he really represents us. He represents protecting people like us, and we really should open our eyes a little bit. That's my little prediction of what I think is going to happen going forward. But Lua wakes up from the brief, coma that he had going on. Luka, in and out of consciousness, wakes up, and ultimately, as the tattoo fades, as the signer mark fades, is able to walk off. Doesn't really thank Yusei or anything, but I think it is shown. I think she cares enough about him as well. And we get Godwin the shot once again, high on the tower, looking down at Yusei. Yusei looking up at him, knowing that Yusei knows what Godwin was after. Godwin probably knows that Yusei is not stupid. He can uncover the scheme that is going on here. And we get a character at the end twirling a card that is Ancient Fairy Dragon. Who is that character? Why do they have this card? How have they come in possession of it? So many questions here. But guys, that's kind of my review here for episode 19 of 5Ds this week. And that wraps up all 3 episodes this week of a Legacy review, guys. I hope you enjoyed, and if you've stayed this long, I greatly appreciate it. Each and every week, hopefully every Thursday, these will come out. That is at least the plan that we have going on right now. So please stay tuned more for the channel and come back for those if you like them. Like the videos, subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned for more podcasts that are going on. Every week we do 7s up at about 8:30 Eastern Time. If you're into the new current Yu-Gi-Oh anime going on, we would love to see some of your lovely faces stop by there. I will be back next week, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you down below.